Well, hey there, and welcome to our little outdoor studio here at the cabin on Huckleberry Hill. I'm going to be in this first fire making demonstration video as part of this series. I'm going to be using a ferro rod, and the fire starting resources that I prefer, especially in this lower Alabama climate. Last night we had at least an inch, maybe more than an inch of rain. Everything is nice and wet, with the exception of my fire making kindling. And the reason it's not wet is because I always keep a supply of this covered, or I try to anyway, so that I have dry fire lighting material. And the first thing I want to mention in the outset is that in the woods, when we go setting up someplace in the woods, whether we're primitive camping or whatever we're doing, one of the things that I've always tried to encourage people to do is whatever fire starting material we're going to need in the morning, be sure that we have that rounded up. And if the weather is threatening, put our dry material under our shelter with us. Keep it dry. That way in the morning we have what we need in order to get a fire going. So let's get a fire going. This is some really good stuff. I like to take the fat wood and process it until I have some smaller pieces of it, and to initially start, I use my knife and get some shavings. Just kind of loosely pile those, and then I use the 90-degree spine on the back of my knife scrape it a little bit, add that to the front until I've got a nice little pile. And that's what I use initially in the fire making process. There are a lot of ways to strike a spark off of a ferro rod. You can do it that way, pushing the knife forward, or you can pull the ferro rod backwards. One of the things about that is if you're striking forward on that ferro rod, the likelihood of hitting that pile with your knife and scattering it is fairly great. Pulling it backwards, you have more control over it, but either of those methods of striking a spark doesn't give you a lot of control over where that spark is landing. And what I have learned to do with the ferro rod is place it right there in that pile of fine stuff that you've scraped with the back of your knife, and I use my thumb on the back of the blade. You know, scrape it lightly a few times, get a few little shavings in there. Give it a few scrapes, and you've got a pretty good little fire going there. I had to check to make sure it was going to be in the... I'll lay a couple extra pieces of fatwood up in there, just for Pete's sake. And then I've got some smaller stuff that I'm going to add, hopefully not putting fire out. A little at a time. There's a lot of different ways to do this. You can build your fire lay ahead of time and slide this stuff up underneath it. One of the things that I've always encouraged people new to fire making skills is to build a fire lay that once you introduce the fire to it and it gets started, the fire will be able to perpetuate itself. You don't want to have to get up and run off someplace to start finding firewood to keep this fire going once you've got it started. And then just keep slowly adding to it, small stuff that'll catch fire easily. I'm a big fan of a teepee or pyramid fire. You just kind of lay that stuff in there. Doing this slowly for demonstration purpose, I just burnt the hair off the back of my fingers. I guess fire, the reason they call it fire is because it's hot. And then you just keep adding to your little wood pile there, to your fire. And there you have it. We don't think about a fire when we're in the house cooking on an electric stove, or we don't think about fire making skills building a quote fire when we turn on the burner of a gas stove. The fire is a very, very important part of our life outdoors, regardless of what we're doing outdoors. And something like this, I can cook food, I can sterilize water to make it safe to drink, I can warm myself by the fire in cold weather, and at night in the wilderness, in the woods, that fire provides a source of light. It's a very comforting thing. So, there's a lot to this business of being able to build a fire. And besides all that, there's a lot of pleasure in just building a fire and sitting by the fire, feeding the fire. So one of the reasons that I chose to use the Ferro Rod first in this series of fire making demonstrations is because the Ferro Rod, in my opinion, is one of the most important items that anyone can carry as part of their everyday carry. It's not affected by the weather. Rain doesn't bother it. It doesn't run out of gas. If it gets rained on, it doesn't, the fire starting part of it doesn't come off the stick. It's just a great little tool to have. And with practice, you can use that ferro rod to create a fire using a lot of different sources of material. Jute twine, any kind of natural cordage like that, that's really fine, that will catch that spark and combust it quickly. Fat wood is my preference. I carry a piece of fat wood in my truck. I carry it in my kit. Shirley has a chunk of fat wood in her kit. It's a great little woodland resource to get to know if you're not familiar with it, and play with it, experiment with it. And the method that I demonstrated, sometimes one spark and it's going, sometimes 10 or 12. But the stuff works, and it works really, really well. I hope the video was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.